I'm Dr. S. Ratnam, Assistant Professor retired. These days I have been teaching English grammar and English literature for the benefit of the students who go for competitive examinations and for those who want to learn English language sitting at home. So in my earlier video, I taught on classical literature and classical movement. So there are certain movements, metaphysical movement or metaphysical writers. Classical movement or classical writers or Augustan age or age of reason. And this present movement is on romantic revival, romantics, writings on romantic topics and romantics. It is called romantic revival. This is the third movement. In my earlier class, I taught you on the nature of writings in classical age and or Augustan age. A set of rules, a framework that was prescribed for Augustan age or the classical writings. The form was very important, not the matter. So long as it was written in that pattern, it never satisfied or satiated the minds of the readers. So a need for change came. They were waiting. People were waiting for a change in writing. They were vexed with the framework writing, the writings that were in the same framework. Only classical means high strata of society and the language used by the high strata of the people, and the images were taken from the high strata of society, kings, monarchs and royal families, or certain high state of subjects. But the people were no longer happy with them. So a kind of shift that took place after this classical age. People were waiting. And that shift, the name of that shift is called romantic revival. And the conditions favorable for the romantics and the mindset of the people and how it was suitable and all these things, let us discuss now. The revolt against the classical school. It is called the revolt against the classical school. People were almost at a rebellious mood on the classical school. For over a century, classical conventions were applied to English poetry within their limitations, striking success. They established the rule of law in literature, by which writers were taught to think naturally and express forcibly. So, rule of law was forced on the writers. So, rule of law means there is a law, and according to the law only they must write their poetry or writings. So that is rule of law. So rule of law has not satisfied the minds of the readers. So this is the classical outlook by which writers were taught to think naturally and express forcibly. A literary technique was evolved, which, in the words of Pope, was nature methodized. So, Pope tells that this kind of situation or the conditions on the classical writing, he expressed it this way: nature methodized. So, nature was not freely used by the writers. It was methodized. So that means nature was put in some framework. In the framework only writers used to write. Nature methodized. But just as the metaphysicals had abused the Elizabethan ideal of liberty, the followers of Dryden and Pope abused the classical ideal of order and restraint. Dryden and Pope, what they did was, they abused and they almost rebelled against the classical order. Mind you, the writers are Dryden and Pope. Art degenerated into artifice in the hands of the great masters. The balance between the two had been judiciously maintained by the lesser lights dealt in stock phrases and illusions, and often lapsed into an arid formalism. So they searched for a limited stock of words, and those words only are to be used. And so language was also arrested in the classical method, and into an arid formalism. In their verse, as Pope himself remarked, wherever you find the cooling western breeze, it whispers through the trees. If crystal streams with releasing murmurs creep, the readers threatened with sleep. So that means it's a way found into nature, a free path that Alexander Pope prescribed for in these lines of verses. So that means nature cools, nature breezes, nature puts us asleep. Nature puts us asleep. So when we channel nature into the right lines, it will be done. So that means it's an open path gone into nature. So this is a kind of rebellion against classical writings. It became clear that the classical mode had its day and needed to be replaced. Signs of revolt, unconscious perhaps, became visible as early as 1726. So signs of revolt, signs of rebellion on the existing order of classical writings were shown as early as 1726. When James Thomson published the first part of The Seasons, a poem different both in matter and manner from any written work during the previous 100 years. So this is a new work that is different from the other works. This work is James Thomson's The Seasons. The seasons and their fervor and their beauties. We cannot imagine such a kind of seasonal beauty or seasonal feelings in classical writings, because in classical writings there were only limited. The scope of writing is limited, and so that this kind of writing was not found in classical writings. But Thomson's work, what appealed to the people was in the seasons. Wonderful poem. The seasonal changes and the beauties attributed to the seasons. The rainy season has its own beauties, its own feelings, its own mindset, the inspiring minds. Likewise, the summer has its own feelings, and winter has its own beauties, and winter has its effects on nature, particularly with regard to the blooming nature, that is flowers and new leaves and the fruits. So that is called the seasons. But earlier this kind of writing was not accepted, but only in this transition period, that is leading to the romantic writing, romantic revival. Romantic means newness. So a newness was found in the writings or in the poem The Seasons. A poem different both in matter and manner from any writers during the previous 100 years. In the Castle of Indolence, which followed later, he revived the Spenserian stanza after an interval of nearly 2 centuries. So in the next poem, that is the name of the poem, The Castle of Indolence, The Castle of Indolence, by the same author, that is Thomson, James Thomson. So Spenserian stanza was taken back after 2 centuries, that is 200 years later. Spenserian stanza was used by James Thomson in his poem The Castle of Indolence, which followed later. He revived the Spenserian stanza after an interval of nearly 2 centuries. Collins and Gray outwitted the movement, the one in the ode and the other in the superb elegy written in a country churchyard. So 2 writers are mentioned here. One is Collins and the other is Thomas Gray. These 2 writers again made a shift from classical writing into a novel writing, that is romantic, what we call today romantic, in a novel way. Collins in his ode and Thomas Gray in his elegy written in a country churchyard. Elegy written in a country churchyard. Wonderful poem. So that appeals very much to the hearts of the readers. It was in a form of elegy. Thomas Gray used the form of elegy. And so he named it Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. So in a country churchyard, while the shepherdsmen, so while they were returning in the evening, they found one country churchyard. And how serene it was, and how beautiful it was, and even the dead people were buried in the churchyard. And so that Thomas Gray brings back to our minds that a remote subject, a subject which is not known hitherto by anyone else to the readers, but he brought it back to the readers, an elegy written in a country churchyard. Wonderful poem. Their lives, the great men and the common people, and all lived, and they were buried after their death in this country churchyard. So peacefully, how they entered into their graves. So all this is a wonderful theme in that poem, an elegy written in a country churchyard by Thomas Gray. Though the classical spirit was strong in both authors, so really they were living in the classical age, so that classical spirit was there. Yet these two poems were romantic in nature. Romantic means new in nature. Yet they were accepted. Goldsmith and Burns contributed greatly to the incipient revolt by their realism and humor in the treatment of scenes of humble rustic life. And there are two writers, that is Oliver Goldsmith and Burns. These were two writers brought the simple rustic lives in their writings. So rustics were not found hitherto in classical writing, but rustic life, simple life, pastoral life was brought back in the writings of Goldsmith and Burns. In the imprint of revolt by their realism and humor in the treatment of scenes of humble rustic life, with Cowper and Grable and much more revolutionary Blake, who are in a real sense transition poets. There were other set of poets, Cowper, C-O-W-P-R, Cowper, and Crabbe, C-R-A-B-B-E, Crabbe. Cowper and Crabbe, and a much more revolutionary Blake. Blake means William Blake. And these are all the transitional poets, the time of transition from classical to the romantic age. So these also showed signs of romantic writings in there. Blake is very famous for his poem, The Tiger. The tiger is an animal. It lives in the jungle. But hitherto no one took interest in such objects. But when this Blake took up this subject, the tiger, it really appealed very much to the readers. And also, transition poets, the old order was at the point of death. The old order slowly was at the point of death and decay. So that means the old order must go and a new order must come. So that new order is Romanticism. Death and the new impatient to be born. In 1798, the publications of the lyrical ballads of William Wordsworth and Coleridge mark the cleavage between the two modes of writing. So finally, the transition leads and ended by the appearance of lyrical ballads of William Wordsworth and Coleridge. So the name itself suggests that lyrical ballads. Ballad was once again brought back into the mainstream, and so that people try to receive the old fervor of writing and they try to enjoy with this new type of romantic writing in lyrical ballads by William Wordsworth and Coleridge. The work was one of the landmarks of English literature. So lyrical ballads is one of the landmarks in English literature. Wordsworth made a landmark in the realm of literature, and from Wordsworth onwards, a new trend, a new thought began and continued. This is why this is called romantic writing or romantic revival started. The new creed and the old. This is another side, a small title. The new creed and the old. Romanticism is a name given to the new tendency. Walter Peter defines it as the addition of curiosity to the desire of beauty. Walter Peter said, what is romanticism? Romanticism means the addition of curiosity to the desire of beauty. Oh, wonderful. Addition of curiosity to know something. Already existing, something is existing. That is called beauty. That is in nature. So man's curiosity to know about the beauty in nature. So that is romanticism. So in that way, the barriers for writing in the name of classical writing were broken. So there was a kind of curiosity to addition of curiosity to the desire of beauty. So that means the barriers were broken, and wherever there is beauty, that was open to the readers through the writings. Wherever there was beauty in nature, that's all. Whatever it may be. It may be the tiger, it may be the lily, or it may be a flower, or it may be a man, or it may be a rustic girl. Whatever it may be, all these are the appealing subjects that were used by these romantic writers. Beauty, the eagerness for new impressions and new pleasures to be sought where the handwork of nature or of the artist had been most cunning. So cunning, the meaning for the word cunning means clever. So cleverly man has thought to enjoy every part of nature that is available to him. Cunningly means cleverly. More than this, it was in revolt against authority, tradition, and convention, whether political, social, religious, or literary. So against authority in whatever the existing order, in politics, in religion, in literature. So in all these areas, there was a kind of revolt came against the existing order. That revolt against the existing order means classical order. The classical order pervaded all fields. Political arena, politics must be like this. Religious arena, religion must be like this. Social order must be like this. And so, in all these areas, there was a kind of a revolt against this existing order. Existing authority, tradition, and convention, whether political, social, religious, or literary. If classicism had kept too closely to the beaten track, romanticism struck out in a bewildering number of directions. So classicism struck to only one way, but classicism opened in a bewildering way. So that means any way a writer can choose and writer can go. He is no longer arrested in the framework of his mind. So the doors closed to him were open to all fields. Directions. It expressed a new delight in simplicity of theme, feeling, and expression.